Welcome to Talk Across America. I'm Doug Miles, and we're here in beautiful Sarasota, Florida. And joining us now on our Book Talk segment, great to welcome one of the co-authors. Very interesting book, I think, about a story not too many of us know about, if anybody knows about it. It's called Aloha Rodeo, about three Hawaiian cowboys, the world's greatest rodeo, and a hidden history of the American West. We're joined today by David Wolman on the telephone. And David, good to talk with you. How are you?
Good, Doug. Thank you.
Yeah, good to have a chance to talk with you for a few minutes. I had an opportunity to read through the book. I went to Hawaii once as a kid. I want to go back, and just from my memories of it, you do see a lot of what looks like the Old West in parts of it, but I guess most people don't really associate Hawaii with cattle ranchers and cowboys and all that, but it really goes back to the late 1800s, doesn't it?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, growing up, I was like you. I grew up in New England. Hawaii was the far side of the moon. You would go to Florida to get some sunshine. But here on the West Coast, I took a trip out to Hawaii a number of years ago now, and bumped into this small statue commemorating this steer roping champion named Ikua Purdy from Waimea, who had gone to Cheyenne, Wyoming in 1908 and taken first place. And right when I saw the sign, I was like, what is going on with this story? You know, who was this guy and what were his experiences like? And I had this kind of cascade of questions that, you know, as a writer, those questions are sort of the first indication that maybe you're onto something. And oftentimes it doesn't lead anywhere. Oh, this has already been done, and lots of people know this already outside of that small community. But in this case, it really looked like a story worth exploring and worth sharing with a broader audience.
And really, this was for that time of in history, which is about the early 1900s, which we're talking about the Wild West show, which these three Hawaiians took place, participated in, was really kind of a competition, kind of a rodeo, kind of an entertainment conglomerate, and that was a pretty huge show. Buffalo Bill Cody, Annie Oakley, people know those names, and that was a big deal then. And these three men came there and kind of took it by storm, didn't they?
They really did. You know, what we, myself and my co-author Julian Smith, we tried our best to sort of tell in tandem the story of ranching and cowboys in the Hawaiian Islands, and then at the same time the rise and sudden fall of this place called Cheyenne, Wyoming, which at the time was really one of the essential centers of the ranching industry. And it was such a fascinating time there because the West as a place was very rapidly transitioning into the Wild West as a myth and this romanticized idea of what life on the frontier was really like. And people in Cheyenne were sort of stuck in that particular moment, watching their world change so quickly. You know, it was as if one window of their homes, they're looking at, you know, conflict with Native Americans that had just ended, and out of the other window of their homes, they're seeing people taking the train from the East Coast out to the Rocky Mountains to take in the spectacle that was rodeo and Wild West shows. You know, they wanted a piece of Wild West fever. So again, they decided, all right, well, let's throw a big party and have some rodeo competition and charge people money for tickets to watch this happen. If they have rodeo fever so much, let's make some money off it.
Yeah, it became such a huge traveling show. They made movies about it, too, later on, but it really was an enormous event. And I guess we'll just quickly talk a little bit about these three men, the Hawaiian cowboys. It's kind of funny in the book how you describe how cattle originally got to Hawaii, I guess, from Spain originally, right? And how they got it off the ships. A lot of these cattle drowned. I mean, not to make a joke of it, but pretty sad. A lot of the cattle didn't make it, right? How they got off the boats originally.
Yeah, so the very first cattle got there as a gift from the British at the very end of the 17th century. Well, but they're Spanish Longhorns, and I think that's where what happens is they produce incredibly, and nobody knows what to do. Here are thousands and thousands of sterile Longhorns running roughshod over the island of Hawaii and some of the other major islands. And, they're terrorizing the locals and, helping themselves to garden plots and even goring people on occasion. And so Hawaii sort of has this ecological emergency. And the way they solve it is by getting some help from the experts who were the Spanish vaqueros, the cowboys on the west coast of North America. California is not yet part of the United States. And these vaqueros had already been managing these large herds up and down the coast of California. And so some vaqueros go to the island to teach the Hawaiians how to do this, how to be cowboys, how to manage the herd. And that's where this tradition was born. But very soon they give it its own Hawaiian spin with their own style of clothing and equipment and music even. And really doing the job in the islands was like nowhere else on earth. And going back to your question, you really see that in spades when the Hawaiians actually have to herd the animals into the surf to get them out to the steamships parked beyond the reef to go to Honolulu or markets abroad. And, that's just a level of cowboy toughness that kind of takes this whole thing into the stratosphere, I think.
Yeah, King Kamehameha, who was the leader of the island at the time, it became such, an infestation, I guess you could say, like, a swarm of insects that are destroying crops. These cattle were doing the same thing, and he had to come up with a way or find a way to control it, and that's how he did it, right? Got these cowboys to come in from the U.S. and other places and teach locals how to do it, right?
That's right. And, it's interesting. I'm glad you used the word infestation because from a strictly ecological standpoint, like this is an invasive species, right? It's completely changing the landscape. But one thing that really stands out in our story, and is a good reminder that Hawaii is a melting pot both ethnically and culturally, is that as cowboy culture came to be a thing in Hawaii, they really made it their own. So much so that on one of my reporting trips there, I was talking to a conservationist. We're up at like 3,000 feet on one of these volcanoes looking out at the pasture land. And I said the words like invasive species. And he's a Hawaiian guy. And he said, if you were to say the words invasive species about these cattle to Hawaiians, I think a lot of Hawaiians would take offense to that. And that line really spoke to me as far as this idea that cattle culture has really become part of Hawaii and sort of etched into their own DNA, and that it isn't this kind of binary idea of like, oh, that's an outside species, that's a native species, when in fact, they made it their own and are so proud of it today.
Don't want to give too much away in the book, but again, to these three Hawaiian cowboys that went into this rodeo, again, the competition was a great part of it, and I guess a lot of people just kind of looked at them. Like I said, they had unusual clothing, kind of the Hawaiian style of cowboy clothing, and probably didn't pay them any attention. And all these three people did very well in their various competitions, didn't they?
Absolutely, yeah. And our hero, Ikula Purdy, takes first. Then there's a third and a fifth place finisher. And, what's fascinating about this story is that people just sort of looked at them as an oddity when they first showed up. There was such pride in Wyoming and along the front range of the Rocky Mountains there about their own cowboys. The steer roping title had never left Wyoming up until that year. And the Hawaiians come to town, and it's kind of like this interesting circus act in a way that they're looking at them at first. But then what happens is they show that they're quite skilled, in some warm-up and then during the day one of competition. And then, as they're sort of in the lead in the rankings, that's when the attitude, at least as far as the tenor of the newspaper coverage is concerned, the attitude really shifted. And you see sort of the writers or the newspaper reporters saying, like, okay, Wyoming boys, it's time to send these interlopers back from wherever they came from and show them who's boss. But, of course, that's not how it happened.
I should say this took place in August of 1908, so that's when the competition took place. And again, Hawaii wasn't a state then. It was, I guess, a protectorate. Maybe that was the term, but it was still part of America at that time. But this whole story and the whole industry of the cattle industry and cowboys and all that kind of helped shape Hawaii becoming a state in 1959, didn't it? It kind of led to that a little bit.
Well, it's such an interesting time for the people of Hawaii. 1908 is just a little more than a decade after annexation. Hawaii becomes a U.S. territory. Statehood is in the late 1950s. But for Hawaiians, it's really this question of wondering, who are we now under the political rule of these overlords an ocean away?
Right.
And by accident, our quiet, taciturn, super skilled cowboys become these representatives of their people. And, they didn't board a steamship to San Francisco thinking, oh, okay, we carry the pride of our people on our shoulders. But in some ways, that is exactly what happened. And, of course, their performance was celebrated back in the islands. They were greeted by thousands of people waiting for them back at the dock, and huge parties and luau's and hula composed in their honor. And they became, in a way, sort of Hawaii's first non-political heroes, and they showed the West that, okay, well, you might have taken over our islands, but you don't really own us by any stretch. And I think that was essential for Hawaiians at that time.
Yeah, great story. I know we're just about out of time. I want to give the title once again, Aloha Rodeo, 3 Hawaiian Cowboys, the world's greatest rodeo, and a hidden history of the American West. We've been talking with David Wolman, along with Julian Smith, wrote this book. And David, do you have a website you want to direct people to? They can get more information about the book?
Sure. I'm simply at www.david-wolman.com. That's WOLMAN.
Great. We'll also put a link on our website. But David, a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for joining us, and good luck with the book, and hopefully we'll talk to you again.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you for joining us today on Talk Across America. Please visit our website at dougmilesmedia.com for more great interviews and content. And if you're interested in any of the books we talk about on the program, please click the Amazon link on our website. It helps support the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again real soon here from beautiful Sarasota, Florida.
I'm Stan Brock. 30 years ago, I formed Remote Area Medical to help people overseas. But then we found generations of families in America isolated by poverty from the health care they need. Together, we can take dental, vision, and medical help to 1 million adults and their kids, right here at home in the United States of America.